Yogis, welcome to Yoga Chats, the podcast where we keep it real about all things yoga. I'm your host, Greg Walsh of Temple Bar Yoga. I'm delighted you're tuning in today for some enlightening chats. This week's Yoga Chats guest is Ewa Szczupak, who leads strength and flow yoga sessions in Temple Bar Yoga. Ewa trained in Temple Bar Yoga many years ago and is now one of our most skilled and popular teachers. Thanks for tuning in, and let's now have the Yoga Chats. Yoga Chatters, hi, thank you for tuning in. It's Greg here, and today I am talking with Ewa Szczupak. Ewa and I know each other a long time. We've been working together for nigh on 10 years, and Ewa teaches in Temple Bar Yoga, teaches regular classes, teaches teacher training, has been practicing a long time, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Ewa, you're so welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Greg. Thank you.
Not at all. I really appreciate having the chat, but we always enjoy having the chat. And could you tell, rather than I chat about you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a yoga practice rather than the whole life of mine. But so I started practicing a while back, back in, say, 15 years ago, in the local studio. And then I found a Temple Bar Yoga and I stayed there for a very long time. And then I did my teacher training with you, Greg, and then I started teaching there. So that's my sort of yoga journey which brought me here. But I guess the practice has evolved, and the practice has been always Ashtanga from the very start, and now it's kind of changing a little bit. So I think most of people would know me as an Ashtanga teacher. Now I teach flow. It's been quite a journey, but it is a long one, and it's been pretty much mostly in the Temple Bar Yoga studio.
I know you're like myself, you're a bit of a Temple Bar Yoga lifer, or
Yeah.
Samadhi as it was back then, of course.
Samadhi,
but now it's
formerly
Temple,
known as Samadhi, yes.
Formerly known as Samadhi, yes. Yeah, we need a symbol like Prince. And we're going back a long time. And we could talk about many things. And I know you've had to work on your practice and, evolve your practice over a long time. You've had various injuries and, challenges. And there's nothing like an injury or a challenge to sort of force you to reevaluate and to upskill in a way as a yoga teacher. But you can learn through adversity, but it's a bit of a bummer at the time. But tell us a little bit about your practice and how it has evolved over the years.
Yeah, so I think it's been going like a good few years back, and I know that we all experience various struggles and difficulties and challenges through the practice. I think that's a part where I kind of started reflecting a little bit more in recent times, where when you start your practice and it's all going great and it's re-evolving, and you think when you were kind of naively thinking it's going to be like this for the rest of your life, and then something hits and then it's not like that anymore, and it's just kind of getting to accept the fact that your practice is actually evolving, and kind of the first time you get hit with that yes, I just need to accept that and see what I can do. So I think the first time it really hit me was maybe 7 years ago, when I got a lower back injury that's still ongoing, and that was something that really changed my practice, in the sense that there were certain things I couldn't do, like twist had become really, really challenging. Back bends have become challenging. Forward folds have become very challenging. So the way that I used to practice, my practice was actually centered around all these things that I couldn't practice at the time. And I think that the frustration came with, and I think this is something that may resonate with a lot of people, that once the difficulty struggles, they hit us, and then we just need to make those changes. We are becoming aware that, okay, that this is the point when I need to reflect how to do it, but also kind of let go of that frustration and be kind of kind to yourself. So and from that point on, I just started very gently becoming aware that the practice can be gentle. I would be very into very strong disciplined practice, practicing every day, couple of hours, going quite far in my practice and trying to go as far as I can. And then I needed to kind of take a step back and find a way to make that practice a little bit gentler, a little bit different. And it is a kind of part of the sort of reflection, the practice, that I think, like, took me over the years to the point that I now accept that, this is how it's going to be. And particularly now, when we're getting older, and again, the body is different and there's all these other things happening in life. Now kind of
Yeah.
I'm in a good place to be able to be happy where I am in my practice.
Okay. Okay. That's really positive to hear. I can relate to so much that you said,
Yeah.
like I know, oh, I would say about 20 years ago, I injured one knee,
Mm,
cycling issue, and that gave me an awful lot of trouble. It gave me a lot of trouble on the yoga mat, and I kind of tried to push through it, which did not help, and ended up
yeah.
needing knee surgery. And then, I've got boxy knees anyway, needed another knee surgery a few years later, and worked through all that and softened through all that, I should
Yeah.
say, as well. Like you're saying, it really made me reevaluate, what is this? So I found I had to explore my practice in different ways, like you were saying. And then at the start of the lockdown, I developed some back trouble. Bone spur grew into one of my spinal nerves, and I could hardly walk. Ended up having spinal surgery, which took then I had scar tissue, and it took a long time to recover. So I had
Mm,
to once again reevaluate what practice is, because exactly what you're saying, couldn't twist, couldn't back bend, couldn't forward bend, could walk mostly. That was pretty good. But it made me realize the importance of things. There was a time where it was very important to me to be able to balance in a handstand or a pincha, and
mm,
suddenly I thought, I want to not wake up in pain during the night. And
yeah.
so my practice became, and this is the beauty of yoga though, it became a tool for easing pain, so I wouldn't wake up during the night in pain. And
Yeah.
kind of coming, that was my baseline that I sort of worked back from.
Yeah, no, you see, and that's the kind of like thankfully I didn't have to go through the same sort of injury that would require surgery or anything like that. But I think that, you do appreciate that you are able to walk, and you do appreciate that you are able to do like a couple of Surya Namaskaras and maybe a very gentle forward fold. When you were in the flare up, it just changes the way you were thinking about your yoga practice. It suddenly becomes less physical and more, you become more aware of your own body, where your body wants to go, and you just basically start adjusting your practice to your ability at the given time, and what's possible with the body. And and sometimes it also means that you may be able to explore more like pranayama, that maybe meditation pranayama become a little bit more importance, because the physical practice is then gentler and different, and kind of things soften. So it is like we tend to say that injuries are the great teachers, and they really are, and they are, for I think, for practitioners as much for us as teachers, because then it kind of brings you back to that sort of like, you step on your mat for the first time, and things are just, they're challenging and there are struggles.
Mm, yes, absolutely. So I know you struggled for a while to really do anything. So can you tell me, how did you sort of rebuild your practice, but also how did you, because it's very challenging when the stuff that you are used to doing feels injurious, and the stuff that you love doing and have loved doing for years feels injurious. So how did you kind of rekindle your love for yoga?
Well, I think the first thing I had to do was just to accept the fact that, the frustration kind of was wearing off, and now I need to do something, because I still want to keep practicing. I don't want to not practice. I want to keep practicing, and I just need to. And I think this is the kind of part that I struggled, and I think a lot of people do struggle with, accepting the fact that, okay, it has changed, and now what do we do about it? So um, I started just exploring different postures as well, and maybe different sequencing them in different way, and also using props. So you'd know that for many years practicing Ashtanga method, I wouldn't be really using props in
Oh,
my
you would be
practice.
quite scathing.
Oh,
It was,
okay,
no,
yes,
no, I
yes.
mean that in a kind way. We
Probably
would,
better put. That's absolutely better put. So there was like, there wouldn't be any props, but I did have props from the kind of old times when I started practicing, and
Hmm.
they were just coming back to use. So my forward folds would be, with 2 blocks in front of me, my trikonasana, my pervitas, they would be all with a block. I'd be
Mm.
using a belt as well, So it was just a kind of like finding a way to make the practice accessible again, but also enjoyable again.
Yeah.
And yeah, props were something that they became my friends, and I still kind of every now and then I kind of use them when there's a flare up or anything like that, because they do help. They make you feel the pose the way you want to feel it
Mm.
without putting any burden on. In my case, it would be lower back. Yeah.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, but it could be anywhere. It could be shoulders. It could be
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. I love using props for the insight I feel in a way it gives me. It lets me come at poses from different angles. I like to my
Absolutely.
my my asana palette isn't huge. I'm not trying to do everything. I love coming back to the ones that I know, but maybe approaching them in a slightly different way. And I found props are great for that. But
They are, and
yeah,
yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Like, and I think that's you are accessing postures from different way completely, and again that does help you to rekindle this love because for
mm,
your practice, because if you tend to practice one way for many many years, and the same postures, in my case it would have been the same postures every day.
yeah,
Well, then doing something a little bit different, it does, changing, breaking that pattern, and changing your routine, and perhaps, I would, for example, in primary series that I've practiced for years, there
mm,
wouldn't be like a lot of postures that I do add on and now, because I think that they do actually benefit my practice. So yeah, it's interesting how you can make those little changes. I think the breaking the patterns and breaking the routine by either using props, adding more postures, that kind of helps to make your practice different and get you excited about it again.
mm, yeah. Did you find you had fallen out of love with your practice somewhat? Did you blame your practice?
I didn't blame my practice, because I think that the practice has given me so much over the years that
Mm,
I would never blame the practice, but I was very close to blaming the practice.
yeah.
It was more, I felt so stuck and frustrated, and I wasn't blaming the practice, but I was thinking like, oh, it's just so hard, and
Mm,
it's something that's been giving me so much over the years. Then suddenly having to lose it, there was a bit of a sort of like, I suppose, grieving process for the loss of the practice as I knew it,
yeah.
and then kind of moving on to that new chapter of practicing the way that is actually suiting me now
Mm,
better. But it is hard, and I think a lot of us struggle with it. But you know what helps as well? It helps talking to other people in our community, and at Temple Bar Yoga is amazing for that. And I think that when we chat to other practitioners about all these struggles, it does kind of help, because it can be a very lonely place. When
yeah.
you get to that point, it can be very very lonely. So having the sort of community of yogis around you, I think it's crucial.
I agree. I agree. I think on one hand, it feels like everyone is doing yoga these days, but on the other hand, it feels like we are doing quite a singular practice. And it is, when you're talking about your practice, you're not talking about going to a class so much as getting up at the crack of dawn before you go to work, throwing your mat down and, getting on it and seeing what comes
Yeah.
up. And it is quite, it, it has the potential to be a little isolating. So you're right, it is so useful to have people, be they, your yoga elders or your yoga peers, that you can just say, I'm struggling with this, or what do you think of that? Or have you any suggestions? This pose is currently biting me in the tail. Um, and if you were to ask me, I'd always say, "Have you tried using a brick
Yes, I know, I
or
know.
ropes?" But that's my way. I love the toys. But yeah, you're right. I think having that community, and we don't talk all the time, but being able to even occasionally lean into someone, call someone up, meet up, have a bit of tete-a-tete after a class. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's essential.
Absolutely, and I think it is like our this the community of yoga practitioners. We kind of we do talk yoga, but then we can relate to each other, and I think
Mm,
that we all all of our practices are different. Every single person is different, they have their own unique qualities to their practice. But at the same time, there are some common experiences, particularly for, practitioners of many, many years, and then people perhaps who teach as well. There are some experiences that are quite common. So it's good to kind of have someone to talk these things through, that sort of support is really important. And I find we do have it in Temple Bar, which is great.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, you're talking about falling back in love with your practice. I think
Mm.
um, having people around you like that massively helps, because if you are practicing on your own in a vacuum, it gets so much more difficult. Just having that little bit of human support. Because I know when I was working through injuries, I would have struggled to go to a class because I had to modify everything so much. I really would have
Mm.
felt like the sad sack in the corner. But at the same time, it was at times like that I was getting so much out of it, because my limitations were way more limiting than they had ever been before. And so the little bits of joy I was getting from yoga
Yeah.
it was really very powerful. Oh,
No, absolutely.
I don't want to go back there, but I'm very grateful for
No.
it. But thinking about what you're saying, I think that yoga, it is a very diverse practice. There are so many different practices to it. Like I found, I something I leaned into much more was pranayama, and sometimes I was just doing it
Mm.
lying down, not with props or anything, just aching, getting down onto the floor. This is when I was having the the narrowing of the nerve canal, and just breathing and taking, and like my pranayama, I don't do the more dynamic stuff so much, because I tend toward um I'm a little highly strung. You'd never think it, of course, in my way, and I tend toward being a little bit stressed. And the last few years have been quite challenging in the
Mm.
yoga world, and so I felt I needed the hug pranayama rather than the triple espresso pranayama, and that's
I
still mostly,
love that.
you know what I
Triple
mean, though.
espresso.
So I
I know what you mean.
and because some of them, like the Bastrika, even the Kapalabhati, I find I feel very zingy afterwards. And if I'm already a little bit, just a little bit wound up, I find that pushes me up too much. So I love the softness of pranayama, and I found that essential when I was struggling, and uh, and the way I practiced would not have been strictly the way I would have learned. I found I had to work with it, because in Iyengar yoga, it's so much about how short your fingernails are and how well you can curl your fingers into your palm if you're doing like alternate nostril breathing, and which part of each finger, the edge of each finger, is touching your nose. And I just had to really let go of so much of that. But I remember attending a session with Tiwari, who Maria has studied with, and a very old Indian pranayama master, and he came over here and we hosted him years ago, and he was doing these practices, and he said, it's about the breathing. Don't get caught up with these details. It's about the flow of the breath. It's about your relationship with the flow of the breath. And he was really kind about it, and I really took that on board, and it made me want to practice. In a way, I found the rigidity didn't so much make me want to practice. Now, saying that, was it 4 or 5 years ago, I spent time in Pune in India, and Geeta Iyengar was teaching pranayama sessions, and I did once a week a pranayama with Geeta, 2 hours, and it was unbelievable. It was spectacular. And I found I would walk out is like, I'd walk out stunned, and I was there with three pals, two pals, three of us, and we usually after the pranayama we had a bit of a treat. We would go for pizza, and we'd sit there in a trance, unable to speak, and maybe halfway through the pizza, because pizza kind of brings you back down, the joys of pizza, and we would say, "My God, that was something, wasn't it?" And that was sort of the height of the conversation. We weren't too gripping on those evenings. So, yeah, pranayama, it was a godsend, and still is for me. I love it.
No, pranayama is, and I think it's something that in our asana, when we are so focused in the start of our practice, usually when we start practicing, we are focused so much on the asana, which is great because to do pranayama, you need a strong body if you want to
You
sit
do.
for 2 hours and do your pranayama. But I think once you get to the really depth of it, it's really transforming.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful tool.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I found after doing those sessions, especially with Geeta Iyengar, now half of it you do some sitting, then you do some lying, then you come back up sitting. So you might be sitting for 40 minutes to an hour.
Mm,
But the next day my back felt like in a really good way. It felt like I had been working on my deadlifts and or whatever. It felt like I
yeah,
had done back bends. It felt like I'd done a really strong practice because just that action of sitting really upright, it's very strengthening for your back. It's very
yeah,
it's a really thorough way to improve your posture. And you have to
yeah,
have a lightening sort of awareness as well, because especially if you're there with Geeta, because she'll pick you out. But anyway,
yeah.
you you know, I know you can drift off with pranayama, but if you're really getting into it, it's very mentally challenging, emotionally challenging, physically challenging, breathily challenging. And I remember someone used to teach meditation in it was Samadhi then TBY, and said to the first time he introduced it, he said to everyone, "Now you all practice yoga. Yoga is using your body to work on your mind. Meditation is just using your mind to work on your mind." But the thing is, if you're using your body, well, your body is so much more present. It's easy. It's there in front of you. If you're doing pranayama, it's much more subtle. Your focus needs to be stronger. And your body, as you said, needs to be strong. You sort of need to have a good base of practice before you start pranayamaing, because otherwise you're just not going to have the sharpness of mind. You're not going to have the ability to sit upright,
Yeah,
hold upright with open hips, whatever it is, for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is.
yeah, absolutely. And that's why I suppose, when you're looking at 8 limbs of yoga, there's asana comes first and then it's pranayama, right? So you do
Yeah,
your physical
well,
first,
that's it. Yeah, it's there, isn't it? The clue is there.
yeah.
And so tell us, have you any tips for people who are practicing for a long time, find their bodies changing, which inevitably our bodies do. When we're in our 20s, we don't realize that, but they start to let us down at times. Have you any tips for someone to stay with the practice, to come back with the practice, to come back to the practice, to maybe if they need for medical reasons, take a break for a while? How do they restart?
Yeah, and I think that it is, yeah, after you take a break and you want to restart and you just basically need to find a way, like I did with props. And I think, becoming friendly with props and not being, sometimes I feel that maybe we feel like I don't want to use props because that means that there's something I can't do. But actually, it can be quite challenging even using the props. So I think that taking the props and taking the sort of adjusting practice to your ability and doing what you can with whatever support you have there. I think that sometimes changing the style of yoga that you've been practicing, sometimes, for me personally, yes, it's still dynamic, but it's quite different dynamic these
Mhm.
days. Maybe going to a slightly gentler class and taking a little bit softer approach as you practice, and I think that again having the sort of the I think that the mindset is quite important, and for me it was the kind of accepting of that your practice is there and it will be there for you, and it's just changing, and that's normal. There's everything is always changing and challenges come with, but again we can get over them. So, as I was saying, the mindset is important. I think the fact that we just come to remember that we loved the practice before, we will always love it. It's always going to be there for us. But accepting the fact that it's just changing, as everything else in life. And once you kind of realize it and accept that, I think it's much easier to fall back in love and reignite that sort of excitement about practicing again.
Yeah, that's a lovely ethos, and it really struck me. I know as a yoga teacher, I will occasionally have someone showing up to, someone who's been coming to me for years, and they come to a beginner's class, and they'll apologize to me because they feel that,
Mm,
oh, I need to go easy, and I always say to them, but I try to say it without sounding overly effusive. I'm just really happy to see you. That's
yeah,
all. Fair play to
absolutely.
you. I really respect when someone says, I need to go softly in my practice, when someone listens to their body. I think that's brilliant. Don't be
Yeah.
apologizing. I'm only delighted to see you. It's always the case because it's back to the community aspect. I find that people who, sometimes I find I'm a, I'm, what's the word? Um, not everyone likes my my approach, and I'm okay
You're not
with
for
that.
everybody. Yeah.
No,
No, I
I'm
think
not.
you are
No,
actually.
no, well, but no one is. But I think I can. The thing is, if someone keeps coming to me, we're going to have an affinity. I mightn't know their story, um, their situation, their work, whatever, but we get on. We know that we like each other because I remember someone saying you don't need to like your yoga teacher, you just need to appreciate the yoga, and I'd sort of disagree because if I'm going to spend an hour a week or 3 hours a week with someone, I need to like them and I need to trust them.
Yeah.
And so if there's someone who's been coming for ages, I'm always and only delighted to see them. And back to the props, I think we can get bogged down in thinking a prop is a prop to prop up. Prop in a way is the wrong word. I think
Mm,
we assume it's to dumb down or water down or make a pose easier. But equally, you can sharpen a pose with a prop.
mm,
You
absolutely.
can do handstands on top of bricks just to get an extra bit of lift. It's so much
Yeah.
harder, but it adds something to it. You can do your four bends and hold two bricks beyond your feet to
Yeah.
to give you extra extension. It's not always about making it easier. It's about
Absolutely.
a different take on the pose.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. But I think that sometimes we do get into this like, oh, I'm using props and this, it's there's this perception, and maybe it's not there anymore, but I remember I certainly, when I was starting practicing, like, oh, I don't use the props, I'm not ever going to need to use them. And it has changed because, yeah, they are great. They're there to assist, and they're there to help, and they're there to change the different poses for you, and accept you can, and thankfully, thanks to them, you can access different things in every post. So I think that they're great.
I love that actually. I think we should maybe stop calling them props and call them assistants. You
Yeah,
know,
little assistant.
yeah.
Yeah,
What
little
assistants
little
shall we
talk
use
and wheel
today?
assistant. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And something that you said earlier, I'd like to come back to, and that is you were saying about how, when you practice Ashtanga every day, it's always the same practice, whereas now you were saying you're exploring different poses and more variety. Do you think it is better to vary your practice every day or to do something very similar every day?
Ha! Now you caught me, Greg, because I still think that there is the Ashtanga method, and working the same sequence every day has a lot of um, benefits, and we can talk about it for hours. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, I want to add postures to my practice. I want to add those. I just simply want to. I don't want to be limited. I do, and like you were saying in earlier about being, rigid in practice. I don't want to be rigid in my practice. I don't want to limit myself. And I do understand why these particular postures are put together, why you practice them every day in the same sequence. But at the same time, I don't see anything wrong these days. I don't see anything wrong with adding something else that I just simply want to do, or something that I know that will be good for me to do in that very moment. So I think, yes, I love the practicing, the same sequence every day, but then yes, I love to practice different things every day as well. So
Hmm.
that doesn't answer the question at all, but it just shows that you can do whatever you want with your practice. It's really yours.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I was asking you the question thinking Ava's not going to like this, but I, but I thought it's. I wanted to hear your answer, and I thought it's it's such a curious thing. My personal feel is that it's very useful. This is only for me. I'm not judging other styles of yoga or anything. It's not my place to. But for me, it would be very useful at a certain period in my practice to by myself do the same things every day, because it's like if you're learning to play an instrument, you learn
Mm.
to play scales or whatever, and you practice those, but then you want to riff and you want to improvise as well, and so but then you will still go back to the scales, and
Yeah.
each of them will give you. So I think it's yeah, I think you're right. I think both ways are valid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, when you start learning, like you still have all these kind of postures that you kind of need to learn to move on to something else. And it's good to practice them every day to kind of get the good grasp of them. But I think at the same time, like, being creative with your practice and adding things that you just simply enjoy as well, and it's not necessarily because you want to do them and for the reason that they're beneficial. You just want to enjoy them and practice something that's a bit of fun. It's great too, and I don't think we should be limiting ourselves.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And have you any final tips? Because something we're quite keen on in Temple Bar Yoga is you come to a class, you do you learn your practice, but roll out your mat at home, have some fun with it. Take it with you. Because the beauty of yoga is, do you need a yoga mat? We've talked about props, but do you need anything really? Like, if I'm heading off somewhere, I'll be very limited in what I'll do, or what I'll bring. I'll probably bring a belt. Depending on the kind
Yeah.
of floor I'm assuming I'm going to have when I go somewhere, I may or may not bring a yoga mat. And that's the beauty of yoga. You really need so little. Like if you're doing bodybuilding, you need the whole gym. If you're doing swimming, well, you need a body of water. Yoga, you really need so little. So, have you any advice for people to help them get on their own yoga mat?
Just, I suppose, like it's pretty simple. Just getting on the mat and see what happens. Like I find that especially when you're traveling, you don't have access to a lot of props or assistance, as you say. But getting on the mat, and sometimes you need to think a little bit more. What am I going to do? How am I going to do? And sometimes it just happens. And sometimes, like, you might have seen a pose or two in a class. You might have kind of like been curious about a pose or two, and just explore. I think it's just the mat is there to kind of be on and explore what happens, and that kind of for me, that's exploration. That's
Hmm.
kind of where it is,
Hmm.
the kind of see what happens.
Mm, yeah, just get on. I always
Mm.
say, get on your mat, do a dog, see what comes up.
Yeah, you say
It'll
do a
take
dog.
us on.
I'd say do a sun salute and then
Yeah,
see what happens.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
similar, but again,
yeah,
like, and exploration and because sometimes your Surya Namaskara can take you very, very different places, in the same way with down the facing dog can take you very, very different places to different postures. So yeah, having a pose or two that and then see what happens.
yeah, yeah. I'm with you. I agree. Ava, it has been a pleasure having the yoga chats with you. Thank you for making the
Thank you
time.
so much for having me. Thank you.
We might come back and have a chat about something else another day. I know people would be interested in your opinion. But for today, have a great day. And listeners at home, thank you all for tuning in. Yogis, thanks for tuning in to Yoga Chats. And remember to subscribe to Yoga Chats on your favorite podcast platform. And why don't you share it? Why don't you comment on it? Why don't you give us a super review? And please do come back for more chats soon. I'm Greg Walsh, and I'll see you on the